They said you would run. They said you didn't have the stomach for combat, that your skin color was proof enough. Proof of cowardice. Proof of inferiority. Proof that you didn't belong on the front lines. The Japanese command studied America's military and saw segregation, saw division, and they made a critical miscalculation. In their propaganda, they painted black soldiers as weak, undisciplined, cowardly. They used racist science and borrowed American prejudice to create their own battlefield doctrine. If they encountered black troops, they assumed they'd break, retreat, beg for mercy, but they were dead wrong, and thousands of them paid for that mistake.
If you enjoyed this breakdown, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop a comment. Your feedback helps shape what we cover next, and you being here keeps the conversation going. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.
You are part of the 93rd Infantry Division, an all-black unit, the first African-American division activated for combat in the Pacific Theater during World War II. Formed in 1942, trained in the southern heat, moved across oceans, dropped into jungles, forgotten by history. You've heard it before. In training, in the chow line, even from your own white officers. That you're only good for manual labor. That you'll never see combat. That you're here to clean up after the real soldiers are done. That you should be grateful for the uniform, for the scraps of dignity offered. The same country that called you to fight still treats you as expendable, replaceable, invisible. But war doesn't care about race. And in the Pacific, death doesn't check skin color before it pulls the trigger. The year is 1944. Bougainville. Thick, choking jungle, mud like quicksand, rain falling sideways, mosquitoes thick as smoke, a nightmare of terrain, and the enemy knows it better than anyone. Japanese defenders are dug in, deep caves, tunnels, spider holes, booby traps in the roots, machine gun nests hidden under palm fronds. You're told this isn't real combat, that you're just conducting mop-up operations. But mop-up means walking into death with no map. It means flushing out fanatics who would rather detonate a grenade in their own hands than surrender. Mop-up means being outnumbered, outflanked, and forgotten. It means sending patrol after patrol into thick green hell, where the enemy hears your every step and waits, silent. They told the Japanese you'd run. Instead, you advanced. They didn't see discipline when you dug in. They didn't expect cohesion, fireteam coordination, flanking maneuvers. They didn't expect you to keep pushing even when your boots rotted off your feet and your rations were full of worms. They didn't expect you to kill with precision. They didn't expect the body count to rise. Over 12,000 Japanese troops lost to a unit they claimed would never hold a rifle in combat. You did more than hold rifles. You turned the jungle against them. You learned how to move like ghosts through undergrowth. You used their own tactics: ambush, misdirection, brutal patience. You took fire and returned it with steel. You buried your brothers and kept going. You fought in the shadows, bled in the rain, and killed in silence. And still no front page headlines. No parades back home. No generals shaking your hands on newsreels. Instead, when the records were written, they said your division did limited combat. They filed your success under support roles. Your medals were rare. Your names omitted. It wasn't just the enemy that underestimated you. Your own army didn't want to admit that you were warriors. Back at home, the color line still ruled. In barracks, in mess halls, in blood donations, you were separate and unequal. Black medics couldn't treat white soldiers. Black heroes came back from war and were told to enter through the back door. But in the Pacific, none of that mattered when the bullets came. At Morotai, you held the line. In the Philippines, you cleared strongholds. You hunted snipers. You fought fanatics. The war didn't get easier, but you got deadlier. Not because of hate but because you had something to prove. Every firefight was a battle against enemies, the one shooting at you, and the one behind you, writing you out of history. But numbers don't lie. 12,000 enemy dead. That's not support. That's not logistics. That's victory. The 93rd was a machine. Worn down, pushed aside, but never broken. Officers were rotated out, missions reassigned, battalions split and shuffled. But the men endured. And the body count told the truth. Your division didn't just survive. You crushed a myth. And Japan felt it. The irony is thick. The Japanese military had embraced a warped version of Western racial ideology. They believed the same myths America whispered behind closed doors. That black troops wouldn't fight, couldn't fight, that they were soft, undisciplined, emotionally weak, biologically inferior. And yet, it was those same troops who forced them out of their hiding places with flamethrowers, who rooted them out of caves, who cut off their escape routes, silenced their mortar, and shattered their morale. The men they mocked became the nightmare that haunted their retreat. And still no statues, no recognition, no line in the school textbooks. Why? Because your victory was inconvenient. It contradicted the narrative. It made a mockery of segregation. It proved that America had suppressed elite talent for no reason other than hate. It showed that courage isn't a color. And after the war, the silence began. Your division was disbanded, folded into memory, not honored, not remembered. No Hollywood films, no best-selling books, just a whisper here and there in veteran communities, a passing line in an academic paper, until decades later, until enough voices refused to stay quiet, until scholars dug up the reports, until veterans came forward, until the Congressional Gold Medal arrived in 2022, not to erase the injustice, but to finally acknowledge it. Too late for many of the men who fought, too late for the families who buried them, but not too late for history, because now the lie is exposed, now the record is set straight. The 93rd didn't run, they advanced through hell, under fire, and wrote a legacy in blood. Not for glory, not for medals, but because they believed in a country that didn't believe in them. They fought under a flag that wouldn't salute them back, and they won anyway. They shattered enemy lines and racist lies. They proved that prejudice on the battlefield is more than a moral failing, it's a strategic liability. Japan underestimated the 93rd because they trusted American racism more than their own reconnaissance. They believed stereotypes over facts, and they lost 12,000 men because of it. And America lost something too, by segregating its forces, by relegating black soldiers to labor and supply. It robbed itself of strength. It slowed victory. It wasted potential. It buried heroes. The cost of racism wasn't just moral, it was tactical. Every time a black soldier was denied leadership, denied training, denied trust, the military weakened itself. It built walls inside its own ranks. It dulled its sword, and it nearly bled out because of it. The war in the Pacific didn't care about skin color. Neither did the jungle. Neither did the sniper with the bead on your chest. But the people writing the orders did. And yet, you still marched, still fought, still won. Because some truths don't need permission to exist. Some legacies don't ask to be remembered, they demand it. The story of the 93rd Infantry Division isn't just about one unit in one theater of one war. It's about the lie that cowardice lives in skin color. It's about the myth that valor has a race. It's about men who were told they were less and proved they were more. So when the history books tried to forget, when the old lies crawl back out, remember this. They said you would run, but you never stopped advancing. They tried to write you out of the war, but the battlefield remembered. The earth still bears the scars of your advance. Bougainville, Morotai, the Philippines, those islands carry whispers in the soil, stories in the trees, ghosts of men who weren't supposed to matter, who weren't supposed to make a difference, but did. The enemy didn't know your names. They didn't need to. They knew your firepower. They learned your tactics. They watched as squads of black infantrymen moved through jungle darkness with lethal purpose. No more illusions. No more propaganda. The myth had cracked, and still, the silence followed you home. No parades when you stepped off the ships. No grand welcome in the cities you had fought to protect. No politicians shaking your hands. No ticker tape. Just a long train ride south, back to the towns where white-only signs still hung in bus terminals. Back to neighborhoods where the uniform didn't shield you from insults. Back to a country that still saw you as second class despite the fact that you just defeated an empire. You had fought for democracy, for liberty, for the soul of a nation. And yet when you returned, you were told to wait, to keep quiet, to stand behind the line. But war changes a man, and something in you refused to shrink. You'd seen too much, lost too many, carried too many brothers off the field to pretend things could go back to how they were. You'd seen white officers break under pressure while your squad held the line. You'd watched your unit outperform expectations, outperform other divisions, outperform the very system that tried to erase you. And maybe that's why they kept your story buried. Because if the truth got out, if Americans knew what you did, then they'd have to confront the lie at the heart of it all. That segregation was not just wrong, it was weak. That prejudice on the battlefield cost lives. That discrimination wasn't just immoral, it was inefficient, dangerous, strategically reckless. Because the enemy didn't care who carried the rifle. They only cared that it was aimed with intent. And yours were. The irony, while Japan's generals mocked you in their propaganda, they were losing to you in the jungle. They dismissed you as cowards while their own soldiers died in ambushes your units planned. They assumed you'd break while you fought through malaria, hunger, and exhaustion, without flinching. They underestimated you and it killed them. But back home, it wasn't propaganda that tried to erase your legacy. It was policy. Quiet, bureaucratic, systematic policy. You were transferred to quartermaster roles, reassigned to service commands, not because you couldn't fight but because your success made the wrong people uncomfortable. The 93rd wasn't supposed to be combat effective. That wasn't the story America wanted to tell in 1945. The nation wanted unity, but not too much. Wanted black labor, but not black heroes. You were useful, but not celebrated. Necessary, but not honored. So they closed the book, but they didn't burn it. And that made all the difference. Because somewhere, years later, a researcher opened it again. A veteran gave an interview. A grandson asked questions. A file was declassified. A name was found in a casualty report. The story started to breathe again. The record began to speak. It spoke of Corporal Harold Moss, who laid wire under enemy fire. Of Sergeant Roy Hanna, who cleared pillboxes with nothing but grenades and guts. Of the medics who patched up wounds with rags and morphine in the middle of firefights. Of scouts who crept through the jungle for hours, marking targets for artillery strikes that shattered enemy strongholds. It spoke of tactical precision. Of coordinated night assaults. Of communication lines maintained under bombardment. Of quiet professionalism. Of excellence that couldn't be denied forever. These weren't accidental victories. They weren't lucky skirmishes. They were the result of skill. Of discipline. Of leadership forged in adversity. You didn't just endure, you excelled. And yet, for decades, you were treated like a footnote. History gave medals to others, statues to others, movies to others, but you kept marching. Because history doesn't belong to the loudest voices. It belongs to the ones who earned it. And you did every inch of it. Even when your own country tried to keep you out of combat. Even when they gave you second-rate weapons, third-rate equipment, and no guarantees of support. Even when your commanding officers second-guessed your abilities before a single bullet was fired. You still fought. Still proved them wrong. Over and over again. You weren't just soldiers. You were revolutionaries in uniform. Every mile you advanced was a blow against the system that said you couldn't. Every patrol, every outpost secured, every ambush survived. It was all a strike against the myth of inferiority. They tried to ignore you, but the battlefield didn't. The enemy didn't. And now, finally, history won't. The Congressional Gold Medal. Too late. Far too late. But it matters. Because it says, we see you now. And not just for what you endured. Not just for the racism, the segregation, the insult, but for what you achieved. You broke the enemy line and the American Lee. You turned prejudice into a tactical error and made the battlefield your proof. And what remains now, what echoes across the years, isn't just a story of combat. It's a story of reclamation. Because what they tried to bury you carried. What they tried to forget you passed down. What they denied you made undeniable. Your fight didn't end when the last shot was fired. It didn't end when the Japanese surrendered. It didn't end when the division disbanded. It continues in the records being corrected. In the names being remembered. In the lessons being taught in war colleges. In the conversations that now dare to say out loud, we made a mistake. We judged courage by color. We measured potential by skin. And we paid for it in blood, morale, and strategy. The 93rd Infantry Division didn't just fight a foreign enemy. They fought America's blindness. And they won twice. Once on the battlefield. And once in history. Now, when the next generation looks back, they won't see shadows. They won't see silence. They'll see fire, skill, strength, a division that defied every expectation. They'll learn that Japanese commanders who once laughed at the idea of black soldiers in combat learned too late that laughter wasn't protection against bullets. They'll learn that even the fiercest jungle couldn't stop men determined to make history. They'll learn that the true power of a soldier doesn't come from color, but from courage. And they'll know, without question, that when the 93rd came ashore, the ground shifted, the enemy faltered, and the myths began to die. Because when you were called cowards, you answered with fire. When they underestimated you, you rewrote the rulebook. And when they tried to erase you, you carved your story into the bones of history. They said you would run. You didn't. You led. They thought history would forget you. That time would do what the bullets couldn't. That your story, bloody, blistered, buried, would fade into the footnotes of a war defined by others. But silence isn't absence. And forgetting isn't the same as being forgotten. Because while the cameras rolled over other units, while generals pinned medals on chests in front of flashbulbs and marching bands, the men of the 93rd Infantry Division were writing something more permanent than praise. They were writing truth. With sweat, with mud, with blood, on ground no one else wanted to hold. In battles no one else thought you could win. And the truth doesn't die easy. They gave you the worst assignments. Not because they were the most important but because they were the least glamorous. Jungle clearance, rear area mopping up, patrolling secured zones riddled with sniper nests and booby traps, fighting an enemy that didn't know it had lost yet. The kind of work that doesn't get movies made, the kind of work that still gets men killed. But you did it anyway, because you weren't fighting for applause. You weren't fighting for headlines. You were fighting for each other, for the brothers on your left and right, for the family back home who might never hear what you did but would know you did it with honor. You were fighting for a country that barely believed you were worth the uniform but whose flag still flew over your foxhole. And that contradiction, that unbearable weight of loyalty and betrayal, it didn't crush you. It forged you. They called you laborers. You became warriors. They called you weak. You became relentless. They called you expendable. You became essential. You didn't have the luxury of equipment parity. You didn't get the best gear, the freshest supplies, the most experienced officers. You had to make do. And you did more than make do. You made history. You made their assumptions look like what they were, prejudice in uniform. And it wasn't just the Japanese who were watching. It was your own brass. It was the ones writing the reports. The ones who couldn't reconcile what they saw with what they believed. Because what they saw were soldiers. Real ones. Skilled, steady, fearless. Black men walking into gunfire with the same resolve as any man who'd ever worn the uniform. And still they hesitated to promote you. Still they kept your name out of the communiques. Still they classified your success as limited engagement. Because to tell the truth would have meant rewriting the lie. And the lie had been built over centuries.